What's up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith, and we are here. Make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, the Fans First Sports Network YouTube channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Also, make sure that if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify in the audio form, follow, subscribe so that you don't miss anything. It costs nothing, and that way you get also the Draft Dynasty show, the Coach's Call Sheet, and we're going to have more NFL content being rolled out as the season gets closer. Coach, what's up? How's it going?
Going great. I'm a little sweaty right now. Just rolled in off the practice field myself. So going from one to the next. Exciting time of year.
It is an exciting time of year. And it seems like every week when we do this show, we start off with who got paid this week. Last week we saw some big contracts being handed out to quarterbacks, Jordan Love being one of those. We talked about that extensively, Tua being the other. Well, another Miami Dolphin got paid. A little bit different way, but it was Tyreek Hill. He reworked his contract with Miami, paying him $90 million over the next 3 years, but he also got a lot of that guaranteed. I believe it was over $60 million of that 90 was guaranteed. It's more guaranteed money than any receiver in NFL history. He's a speedy receiver. He's going to be 33 though. What do you think about this when this receiver's on the wrong end of 30, Coach?
Yeah, it's interesting. The rework gives him about 60 million new guaranteed dollars. And then in addition to the leftover guaranteed money on the existing deal, it's going to wind up being just north of 100 million guaranteed, a little bit more than what Justin Jefferson got. And that is interesting because he's a speed receiver who is now, yes, on the wrong side of 30. And those guys often break down pretty quickly. So it's a win now move by the Dolphins for sure. I mean, I think they believe that they've got a window. They've got all these speedy guys. Waddle's younger, obviously, but they signed Odell Beckham, who's at the back end of his career. I don't know how many years Hill has left as an elite receiver, but they obviously feel like they've got a shot. And whether that window is 1, 2, or maybe in this instance 3 years, between the Tua signing and this, I think that they feel like they're going to lock down their key pieces and take their shot. So, I mean, it's hard to fault them for it. Now, if Tyreek Hill gets injured and suddenly can't run like the cheetah anymore, then maybe they're going to get some criticism, but I understand the move.
And when I first saw the move, I thought it was, man, like that's odd because he is on the wrong side of 30. And like you said, all those things about being a speed receiver. And then just before we went and recorded, I saw this clip from Dolphins training camp, and Tua threw a ball that it looked like it was overthrown by 15 yards, easily 15 yards. There's two players and Tyreek Hill almost even. And next thing you know, he hits his other gear and comes up with a diving catch. It's just amazing. This guy is a freak when it comes to speed and quickness. I think this is a great move for Miami. You're going to guarantee money, and yes, there's a risk of injury. That's a risk with any contract, regardless of a player's age. And I think even if he loses some of that straight line speed, he'll still have the quickness. They'll still be able to use him. And for the only 3 years, okay, then you're talking about a 36-year-old. I'm sure there's some outs in that contract. I think this is a good move. And I think the question now is, we've talked about this a lot. Like, all these players are getting paid, and then there's some that are on the peripheral. They're just like, well, wait a second, what about me? So, like, what is CD Lamb thinking right now in Dallas? Is he thinking, okay, he's getting paid, all these quarterbacks are getting paid, what is going on? Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers is another one who once paid and necessarily hasn't gotten that money. What are your thoughts about those guys that are still waiting in the wings?
I think it's interesting how this was a restructure, and they're basically saying that we're going to add guaranteed dollars to the existing deal. That might now be an avenue that some of these guys can try if they don't necessarily believe that they can get the overall contract, because the overall dollar value is getting so absurd. It's now up into the 50s for quarterbacks. It's into the 30s for wide receivers. And how many teams can afford, if you've got a franchise quarterback and an elite receiver, how many teams can afford to pay those guys? I remember one of the conversations you and I had a while ago when Joe Burrow got extended was that with Burrow and then Jamar Chase coming up, we were estimating that those two were going to accumulate about 40% of the salary cap. a lot of teams aren't going to be able to do that. So I just wonder if there's a way for some of these guys to get creative in the structuring of their contracts to get the guaranteed dollars as opposed to the so-called, total sum.
Yeah, and I wonder if NFL teams might just say, why are we building in these years if we only want for this many years, as long as the contract is written so they can get an out at certain times? That's neither here nor there, but Tyreek Hill gets paid. We'll see who gets paid next. Let's go to our next topic, one that I wasn't following the appeal very closely. This is obviously the appeal process for the NFL Sunday Ticket lawsuit that had a federal judge overturn the verdict. And so that $4.7 billion judgment that we were all like, all right, let's start counting our thousands. Yeah, it's not happening. At least now I did hear there was another appeal, and this is going to go probably back and forth. And it just depends on what judge is hearing the case. But what was your thoughts on finding out that the NFL is not going to have to fork out $4.7 billion, that this might not equate in a guaranteed 18th game, and that the owners are probably sighing a huge sigh of relief in every way possible?
Well, the NFL whip around is a decidedly non-political format, and we try to stay clear of political issues. They don't seem to be very uniting these days.
No.
But I think that this is as much a statement about our judicial system as it is about anything else, that within our appellate courts, where there are 94 district courts and 13 appeals courts, if you can find the right judge,
yep,
you can probably get the verdict that you want. And that's really not how the Constitution was designed. These judges are supposed to be impartial, but we know that that's not human nature. So I think if you get really good lawyers and they can get your case seated properly, then you've obviously got a better chance to succeed in certain environments than in others. In the NFL, with all their money, I think that they were able to probably find a fairly friendly outlet, if we can put it that way. But it's not surprising, though, really, because we are in an era right now where a lot of these big decisions being made in the courts are friendly to business. And so I really wasn't surprised at the verdict at all.
I was more shocked with the first verdict in that they went against the NFL.
Yeah.
And I honestly was like, I didn't understand the whole premise of the lawsuit in the first place, because in my opinion, the NFL is its own entity. The NFL has a product, and therefore my viewpoint was, well, capitalism states you can charge whatever you want for that product. And then somehow or other people said that, I guess what they and DirecTV did had to do with blackouts. I did not read up on the full details of this case, Coach, but it is what it is. I was not cashing any, or I wasn't making any extravagant purchases waiting for the $1,000 check to come in the mail for me being a Sunday Ticket subscriber for well over a decade. But it'll be interesting to see what happens here. I don't think it matters. Like, I don't think it's going to dictate anything. Like, do you know anyone that has been a Sunday Ticket subscriber and then says all of a sudden, oh, this is horrible, I'm not doing this anymore? I don't know anyone. If they're a Sunday Ticket person, they're going to continue to be a Sunday Ticket person.
Correct. People are willing to pay for things that they love. My wife and I love to go out to eat. Our biggest vice is that we're kind of like foodies, right? Yeah. And we complain all the time about how expensive it has gotten to go out to eat, but that has not stopped us from going out to eat. We continue to go out, and we're just spending more money than we did and finding ways to compensate for it otherwise in our life. And I think that's how a lot of people are, man. If NFL ticket increases and there aren't alternatives, the demand for football will continue to be so great that people will probably pay it.
It's going to be really interesting. I did hear that there's another appeal happening. We'll see what that amounts to, but the NFL keeps its money. Shocker. Let's go to our next topic. The NFL had the Hall of Fame induction ceremony over the weekend. It was delayed because of weather. The Hall of Fame game was canned early because of weather. But its newest entrants are Dwight Freeney of the Colts, Julius Peppers of multiple teams like the Bears and Panthers, Patrick Willis of the 49ers. Is it Randy Gradishar? Is that how you say that, Coach?
Randy Gradishar, yeah.
Okay. Andre Johnson of the Texans, Devin Hester of the Bears, and Steve McMichael of the Bears. Really sad story with Steve McMichael, who's barely clinging to life still as he battles ALS. What was your take on the Hall of Fame class, Coach?
Yeah, it's a good class. There's a lot of guys who sort of have signature things you remember about them, right? Dwight Freeney, one of the all-time spin moves, man. He was deadly with that thing while rushing the passer. Devin Hester, just the guy who you never want to kick the ball to, and when you did, it just seemed to wind up in the end zone. I remember the Tony Dungy talking about playing the Bears in the Super Bowl back in, I guess, around 2006 or so. Mm-hmm. And he'd been preaching to his team all week long in the lead up to the Super Bowl that, like, hey, look, we're not going to kick the ball to Devin Hester. Let's not be stupid, etc. And then the night before the Super Bowl, he kind of had this moment of bravado where he was like, you know what, man, to use a Mike Tomlin phrase, I'm not going to live in my fears. And he went out in front of his team and he gave him this big speech about how we're going to be the aggressor and we're going to come out there and we're going to be the alpha and yada, yada. And he said, you know what, damn it, we're going to kick the ball to Devin Hester and we're going to run down there and blah, blah, blah. And so he changed his mind, right? And on the opening kickoff, they kick it to Devin Hester. He ran it back for a touchdown. Tony Dungy said that as he was watching Devin Hester run down the sideline, he was thinking to himself, man, I just made a humongous mistake. I mean, Devin Hester was that guy, like you just don't put the ball in his hands. And he was a special guy. So I think there's some great names in that class.
Well, let me ask you this before we go into any more specifics about players. I want to ask you a very general question about the Hall of Fame. What do you think are the prerequisites for an individual to even be in consideration for the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
I don't see. That's a tricky question because, like, in every sport, the bar gets moved. So, right, like a lot of these, like Randy Gradishar, linebacker for the Broncos, when I was a kid, he was a star in the league. But he played in the NFL when they had 14-game seasons. So how do you measure his stats against the stats of a modern NFL linebacker who in a year or two, we might be seeing 18-game regular seasons? Right. Obviously, the statistics, the game has changed too. You look at the stats of some of these quarterbacks who are in the Hall of Fame from the 1970s, whose best seasons they might have thrown for 3,200 yards. And now we've got guys throwing for 5,000 yards in a season because of the way that the game has changed. It's really tough. I mean, the Pro Bowl used to be a measuring stick because the Pro Bowl used to be a real valuable thing. And now that's harder. So I don't know, man. I don't know if I have a good answer. Obviously it's something that writers have a heavy say in. So I think that there's going to be some focus on this as we move forward. Does there need to be a reassessment of the criteria?
I think that, in my opinion, if I were to give an answer to the question that I posed to you, it would be that individual player had to do something exceptional. So that could be team success and having a large part of it. So Terry Bradshaw's 4 Super Bowls with the 1970 Steelers, that is something exceptional. And he was the MVP of some of the Super Bowls and had some really big moments. If you look at Terry Bradshaw's career stats, you don't see a Hall of Famer in that regard. But you're not going to keep Dan Marino out, even though he didn't have the team stat of winning a Super Bowl. He never won one, but you're not going to have Dan Marino, for crying out loud. I guess for me, I look at some of these players and I'm not going to degrade anyone, but I want to say to someone like, so Devin Hester was the best, maybe the best return man of all time. So that's exceptional. But Andre Johnson is a great example. What did he do that was exceptional that should have him in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, that's a great question. He was really good for a really long time. Sure. But I don't think he was ever the best wide receiver in the game. He never played on a championship team.
Right.
So, does longevity, does an extended period of being really, really good, is that good enough?
Right. And the reason I say this is because it was a loaded question from the start. I'm going to use this platform to continue to pound the table for my man, Hines Ward, because Hines Ward, Pittsburgh Steeler, we're fans. I'm biased, openly admit that. But Hines Ward, if you look at his numbers, he has the numbers, 1,000 receptions. He has the accolades, 2-time Super Bowl champion. He was the MVP of Super Bowl 40. He's got Pro Bowl honors. I even think he might have an All-Pro under his belt. Can't say that for sure. And when you look at his numbers, they're never going to match up with the players that are getting in today because of what you just said. More games played, different era. And you also you can't take away the stylistic a fact of that Hines Ward changed the game in terms of how it's officiated and what wide receivers can and cannot do from a blocking standpoint. And so I look at this and say, okay, Hines Ward was exceptional in multiple ways, but yet he's not in. And when you look at the upcoming classes of wide receivers, I don't see him getting in anytime soon. And that's what kind of bothers me, because now it becomes this, and you said about the writers, it becomes a popularity contest. It becomes well, there's too many Steelers in it anyways. How the hell is LC Greenwood not in the Hall of Fame? Like, that's a sin. That, if anyone doesn't know who LC Greenwood was, go back and study the Steel Curtain defense, the gold shoes. That's LC. If sacks were a legitimate stat when he was playing, the guy would have been, he led the whole Steel Curtain. Like, that was his MO. I don't know, Coach. What do you think about that?
It's a valid point. There's always going to be people that are slighted. Hines Ward's in a tough spot because of the way the receiver position has now taken off. I mean, Hines Ward never had a 100 reception season, and now having 100 plus catches a year is going to be what's expected of the best receivers in the league. So, but then again, a guy like Randy Gradishar, when I saw his name, I was a little kid, but I just remember Randy Gradishar having his football card, and it would say All Pro on it. He was a really good linebacker, but like Andre Johnson, probably never the best in the NFL at his position. Denver Broncos never won a Super Bowl while he was in the league. And he was just really good for a really long time. Why 40 years after he retires does he get in? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe it takes Hines Ward 30 or so years to get in, and then they just kind of come back around to him at some point.
The same thing happened, and again, sticking with the Steelers bias here, but Donnie Shell. When Donnie Shell got in a few years ago, he had to wait that long until I think it's a different committee that hears the players that have been eligible for years. But it's a shame, and I'm not taking anything away from Andre Johnson or Randy Gradishar or Devin Hester, any of these guys that got in. It's just it's tough when there is no clear cut, this is what we're looking for. It turns into what I just said, a popularity contest. And so any final thoughts on the Hall of Fame? It was really tough for me to see Steve McMichael. I've spoken about my friend who did it from ALS, and I saw that. That brought back some really bad memories. But Steve McMichael is at least still alive when he got his gold jacket. Any final thoughts on the Hall of Fame?
I love the speeches. I love watching the speeches. It just, sentimental way, I get choked up sometimes watching these, because this is the ultimate. This is the pinnacle of what you can possibly achieve as a football player. And it must be, it's like, watching the Olympics now, right? You see these people win gold medals. It's the thing you've worked at your entire life, and then you've reached the mountaintop in your profession. And it just must be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that is the preseason is officially underway. I mentioned how the Bears and Texans game was halted in, I think it was the third quarter, due to weather. The Bears technically having the advantage when the game was halted at 21-17. Chicago's starting quarterback, not Caleb Williams, threw 3 touchdown passes. It was Brett Rippon. Any thoughts on the Hall of Fame game experience in and of itself? So we'll talk about Rippon and his performance, but also, what did you think about the kickoffs and some of the things that we were seeing for the first time in 2024? Let's start with Rippon. What was your take on him?
I was a little surprised that Caleb Williams didn't play at all.
Yeah.
The Bears must feel pretty good about him. He's only going to get 2 preseason games. The third preseason game is the one that the starters hardly play in at all. So, really, he's going to get 1 preseason game, and that's going to be it. And then they're going to throw him in opening day as the starter. And that's a little surprising to me. Maybe they feel great about where they are, right? I mean, Brett Rippon throwing 3 touchdown passes. You got a new offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron there in Chicago, who worked wonders with Geno Smith in Seattle. Maybe the quarterbacks are making great progress, and a guy like Brett Rippon, a career journeyman backup, can step in and be impressive. And maybe they feel the same way about Caleb Williams. So I don't know. Is it time, Jeff, for the Bears to actually produce some quality quarterback play? It seems like they feel pretty good about Williams.
I would have had him in there for a series. just to, hey, look, this is your first NFL debut. It's not a real game, but still get the butterflies out, go through your warm up, do all that stuff. And I know he was dressed on the sideline. It's not like he was in street clothes, but still, I would have played him a series. But I'm not going to believe that the Bears have done anything positive with a quarterback until I see the products on the field for a sustained amount of time. Because even when Justin Fields was there, even when Kyle Orton was there, even when Jay Cutler was there, hell, go back to Rex Grossman. They all had glimmers of, wow, the Bears have their next guy, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath their feet. So I'm going to wait until it's more sustained. But I want to ask you about the kickoffs. What was your take on the first live kickoff with the new rules in this Hall of Fame game?
I'm a fan. I think it's going to be very exciting. Anything that requires the coaches to come up with new schemes, I think makes the game more interesting. I mentioned this when you and I were talking on your Let's Ride podcast for the Steelers the other day. When I was at Steelers training camp last week, Pittsburgh's kicker was putting the ball sideways on the tee and kicking knuckleballs down into the landing zone, which was trying to create a strategic advantage for the coverage team. And then I read on, I think it was The Athletic this morning about in one of the joint practices that teams are having, I think it was the Rams and the Chargers, that there were a couple big plays, returns in the kickoff game because of the way that it was being schemed up. I don't know what's going to happen. And that to me is a positive thing. Last year, you knew that the kicker was going to bang the damn ball through the end zone and they're going to take over with the ball in the 25, and that was boring. This year, it'll be far from boring.
It's going to be interesting. I'm sure that there are some special teams coaches that are saying, look, just kick it normally into the landing zone. Let's go down and make a tackle. And then when the regular season starts, then let's try and enter some new tweaks and wrinkles. And like you said before on this podcast multiple times, it's a copycat league. So if one team finds something that they think works, other teams are going to pick up on it, and it's not going to be as novel at that point. But let's go to our final topic, and that is continuing with the preseason. The full preseason schedule kicks off this weekend, all 32 teams in action. Is there anything in particular that you're going to be paying attention to at all during this slate of games?
Well, yeah, I think the quarterback battles are always interesting.
For sure.
I think you have three teams for sure, Denver and Minnesota and the Las Vegas Raiders, that have a real legit quarterback competition on. Maybe the Patriots do as well, a fourth. Do the Steelers have a legitimate quarterback competition? Yeah, I don't know. Russell Wilson hasn't done much so far. He's been sidelined by a calf injury, and there's some people who feel like Justin Fields is doing some good things. Maybe that's a fifth team. I think that's always interesting, especially when it involves the rookies. You got a lot of these rookies now coming into the league. Who's going to be ready to play out of the gates? That'll be interesting for me to see. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, if you're those teams, you got to play both your guys because you need to get a look at them. And again, you only have a couple preseason games to do it in. So that's what I would look for.
I mean, as a Steeler fan, I want to see Justin Fields play just in general. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to play. I think that Justin Fields is going to see a significant amount of time. I'm just curious. What he looks like because I've heard your reports, I've read reports, and I just want to see if maybe the Steelers might have something, lightning in a bottle, so to speak. But I also want to know where the hell's Brandon Ayuk going to be playing? Where is he going to be playing? As we record this, rumors are swirling around San Francisco and the 49ers about who has the leverage, and he's not showing up. And I mean, there's people that are tracking planes coming out of San Francisco, and where is Brandon Ayuk? I mean, you're old enough, Coach. You probably remember the show Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? I feel like this is where we are with Brandon Ayuk. I don't know where he's going to go. I honestly don't think he's going anywhere. Personally, I just want it to be over. I just want him to sign somewhere, go to the 49ers. The Browns have been mentioned. The Steelers have been mentioned. The Patriots have been mentioned. Just go somewhere, but I'm curious as to where he lands.
Yeah, the Commanders, I think, is an interesting thing because of his connection with Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
But if you are San Francisco, why would you move him? Unless somebody was willing to, again, like we've said before, move heaven and earth to get him. Why would you move him? Is he going to really sit out the season? I mean, is Brandon Ayuk going to do that? I don't think that benefits him at all. And if you're the 49ers, you've got an opportunity really to run it back. I mean, the Niners lost the Super Bowl in overtime, and they bring back a lot of their team. I'd feel pretty good about that if I were San Francisco. So again, man, trade offer blows me away. Maybe I'd move him. Otherwise, I'm going to make him play.
Yeah, I just you would think the old school methodology is that a player on a team like San Francisco would say, you know what, let's go out, let's just run it back, and then I'll get paid big money after this because I'm going to be a free agent. And instead, it's the me thing, and a lot of people despise that about modern sports, and that's just what it is. But ultimately, I just think about Ayuk, and I just want it to be done. I just want it to be over.
You know what's fascinating to me about that, though? And I get it because I've been in that camp, the selfish athlete.
Yeah.
But if you're, I mean, I live in a town where the real estate market is really valuable. It's a barrier island, houses right on the beach, the bay, worth lots and lots of money. I mean, if the realtors are doing everything that they can to maximize the value of the land here and get every nickel that they can, while they, especially when they know the market is good, nobody bats an eye. Nobody's like, oh, the realtors are being super selfish here, or whomever it is, right? But
Right.
when a pro athlete does the same thing, and I think it's probably because we're invested in them within our team. If you're a Niners fan, you don't want to lose Brandon Ayuk. So if Brandon Ayuk is threatening to sit out or force a trade, then you're like, that guy's selfish. But
Yeah.
But is that guy being selfish, or is that guy just managing the market?
That's a great point. And I like the realtor comparison that you brought up. And the thing for me is that I look at things and say, we are, like you said, we're fans of teams. And so we always tend to side with the organization over the individual player. And I don't blame these guys for trying to get the most that they can. The average career lifespan of an NFL player is something like 4 years, if that. Now, some of these players that we're talking about are not of that ilk. They're more of the, you know, extended careers 10 plus years. But I think about Ryan Shazier, and Ryan Shazier has openly stated that he was in line to get that big
Yeah.
contract. And what happened? Dude gets paralyzed from the chest down, and he's trying to battle his way back. Now he can walk and jog, but he's never playing football again. Think about what he missed out on. He's never going to hit that payday. I'm sure he's financially sound, but he's not what he could have been. I understand why players might say, I'm going to get it the best deal I can get for myself while I still can. So I get that side of it too. All right, let's finish up with a player profile. Justin Herbert, quarterback of the Chargers, has been in the news. He's dealing with a foot injury. Not sure if what you want to talk about is relating to that, but go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, no, I'm not one to say, hey, let's panic. I mean, my gosh, we haven't even had week 1 of preseason yet, but I would think it's a little concerning right now with the Chargers that this foot injury, which is related to a plantar fascia injury, bottom of your foot, that stuff can be painful, and it oftentimes simply takes time to heal it. And if you come back too quick, it repeats itself. And so it looks like they're going to put him in a boot and shut him down for the rest of the preseason and really not let him play until week 1. But in LA, you've got a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, an entirely new receiving core, a whole new system to learn. It just feels like for a Chargers team that with Jim Harbaugh coming in and a lot of excitement around them and a lot of national questions about like, when are the Chargers going to like actually show up? Every year they look great on paper. Every year they seem to underachieve. This is probably the last thing that they want to have to start their year under these types of circumstances. So this will be really interesting to watch. What kind of a start do the Chargers get off to? Does the Herbert injury and all of the change there really set them back?
Well, yeah, because those injuries to your foot, even if you do shut it down, they can be re-injured rather easily. And sometimes it requires surgery. And so I think a lot of teams are looking at, okay, do we have the Chargers on the schedule? Yes. When? Pittsburgh Steelers, week 3, first home game. I would say that there's a chance that if he plays, he might not be 100%. Now, he's still Justin Herbert, and he still probably has a rocket arm, and he's still smart enough to read the field, but not 100%. Herbert's better than the alternative. So Justin Herbert, I mean, again, we said this all last season on this show with Brandon Staley. Like, there's this thing called charging. Like, they're charging it up. Like, that they're messing it up somehow, some way. It just seems like this is status quo, does it not?
It does. And if I were a Charger fan, I would feel like, oh my God, here we go again. You feel snake bit almost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, really interesting. But this has been a great show, Coach. What's coming up on the call sheet this week that we can look forward to?
So interesting. You mentioned LC Greenwood earlier. It's episode 68.
Ah,
We're going to talk a little LC Greenwood. That was his number, amongst other guys. A lot of great players to wear the number 68. But we're also going to get into, as we move now a little further into the preseason, some analysis of how do you go about, as a coaching staff, really evaluating your personnel and starting to trim your roster? What do you get in? How do you get into that evaluation process? What allows a guy to pass the test, so to speak, and make it to the next round of cuts? And now, obviously, we're not talking about veteran guys, but we're talking about those fringe players, et cetera. What gets you past week one of the preseason, and what gets you cut?
it's going to be fun. I look forward to that, Coach. And as always, thank you for your time. We'll see you next week on another NFL Whip Around. Take it easy, everyone.